This is Retheater. I am Lindsay Cuyava. I am the artistic director here. Our whole goal is to help bring theater education to more students and to also help inspire educators to use theater as a tool for more community engagement and community activism, but not in a scary way. And so I'm just really excited to be able to be hosting these brainstorms. I know a lot of you educators, like we're all like in this new space of what do we do? Because this is not how theater is meant to be taught. So with these brainstorms, our whole goal is Retheater is bringing in some of our mentors that are a part of our programming to talk about different ways that maybe we can be teaching these different subjects online. And so today, our focus is on specifically how can we teach costume design and how can we teach stage management, which that'll be a very interesting conversation. And so before, so what I'd love to do, what we're going to do is I'm going to introduce our mentors, and then I want to just like carve out a little space for all the educators so that we can kind of like, I want to know how you guys are doing, but it'd be awkward if you didn't know two of the people that were on here. So we'll introduce the mentors while we're doing that. I would love for you guys to get to know each other too. So if you want to pop over in the chat, if you haven't used Zoom yet, if you go down to the bottom of your screen, you will see a chat bubble. If you want to pop over there and say like where you're from, what subjects you teach, that kind of stuff. As we're going through the brainstorm, that would be also a great place to put any questions you have, any resources you want to share. I don't know anything about costume design and stage management, so my job is going to be to man the chat. So yeah, go ahead and put your stuff there. Also, when you guys entered into the meeting, I automatically muted you. If you, at some point, like we want to hear from you all and all of that. If you go also down to the bottom bar on Zoom, on the left-hand side, you will see a microphone and you can unmute yourself. But that should do it for all of the logistics. I'm going to throw it over to our awesome mentors and have them introduce themselves. So let's go ahead and let's start with Anna.
Hi, my name's Anna Fusco. I'm currently in New Jersey. I teach in New York. I teach in it's called Repertory Company High School. It's a performing arts high school in Times Square, small school. Been doing it for about 10 years. And prior to that, in my past life, I was an equity stage manager. So I started in the, New York, climbed the ladder, did a ton of off-Broadway, lots of non-for-profit, like MCC and MTC and all the initials, and worked my way up. And toured, did Broadway a little bit, and then just made a left and went to grad school and started teaching. So while I was climbing the stage management ladder, I was a teaching artist as well. So the sort of education world and theater world collided in my life very early. So here I am, and currently home with my 2 kids and, making it all work somehow. I have no idea how, but trying. So.
Yeah, well, thanks, Anna.
Yeah.
We're gonna be brainstorming. And so Kyle, do you want to introduce yourself?
I'm Kyle. I'm currently based in Bloomington, Illinois, which is central Illinois. I work at Illinois Wesleyan University as a costume production coordinator. So I work with a lot of college students building our shows for each semester. I'm also the costume shop manager for an equity theater in Door County, Wisconsin called Peninsula Players Theater. And I've been up there for 9 seasons. I do everything in costumes, wigs, makeup, hair, as well as costume design. And yeah, that's me.
Wonderful. Awesome. Well, thank you both. I'm very excited for everyone to get to know both of you. Kyle and I went to college together, so we go back a long ways and worked on many productions. So I'm really excited for him to share his costuming stuff because it's crazy awesome. So before we go ahead and start to jump into the brainstorm, I did want to leave a little bit of space and just see how you all are doing, because I'm sure life is kind of crazy. So I'm just curious if anybody wants to jump on and share, like, what is working for you right now? And is there any like problem spots? Is anybody still doing rehearsals? Like, where are you guys at? You can unmute yourselves if you want. I'll sit in silence awkwardly. And if nobody talks, then we'll go on.
I only see one person. Does
Oh.
anybody?
There's other people too.
Yeah,
Okay.
okay, cool. Just making sure.
My name's Harrison, and we have officially canceled school for the rest of the year. I'm going to brick and mortar, right? So we're doing completely online schooling now. And we did cancel our production of Fusco this year, possibly moving it to the end or to next year. MTI has actually been really great with rights and stuff. They've been telling us, things like that. So, but we are going to move ahead, and we're going to try to do something on Zoom, some kind of cabaret or concert where we can honor our seniors before they graduate and go off into the world. So we're working on that right now. And my classes, we are still enriching. We are not teaching new material yet. After this week, we should be getting a new document telling us that we will have to be grading and stuff. So I'm really excited to touch base on some, because we have not done costuming in my class yet for stagecraft and tech theater. So I'm really excited to think about how we can teach some new stuff virtually for costumes. And stage management also. I'm super pumped about this session. So thank you very much for doing this.
Oh, good. Well, I'm glad. Hopefully it is helpful in many ways. Also, Kyle Harrison's wife is from Wausau.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, crazy worlds. Great. Does anybody else want to jump in and share like where you guys are at? Or if you wanted to put it over in the chat, just want to give some space in case somebody wants to chat about anything.
I'm Jeff Ott. I'm not sharing my video because I look horrible today. I really do. It's bad. We are actually going to work on a small production with my junior high kids to do a virtual read through. Try to teach it like radio theater.
Ooh.
And we do a radio show every year. So these kids just did a radio show.
Okay.
So it's kind of, going to do it a little bit different. And my community theater and I are going to do a virtual table read on Sunday night for Glenn Ross.
Ooh.
And so it's going to be pretty cool, I hope.
Yeah.
Anyway, thank you very much.
Yeah, no, thanks for sharing that. Anybody else want to jump in with anything? Otherwise, we'll go ahead and get to the brainstorms. Okay, great. Let's jump in. I always hate those like awkward pauses of like, does anybody want to do anything or say anything? And I'm like, God, it's awkward. Great. So let's go ahead and let's start with costume design. And then we'll finish up with stage management. We'll do that at the end because stage management is going to be very interesting. For sure. So let's go ahead. So as I told both Anna and Kyle, I said, imagine that I'm a teacher who doesn't know anything about how I would possibly teach costume design, which is very true because I would have no idea how to teach costume design. So what are, other than just be like, pick some clothes that look cool. I asked Kyle to prepare some stuff of like a high level, like what goes into costume design besides just like, clothes that look good and sort of time period correct. So Kyle, do you want to just kind of start, and then Anna too, feel free to jump in, both of you, we'll start talking about costume design.
Awesome. So costume design is actually a lot bigger than what you think it is. So there's a lot that goes along with designing costumes. So I'll just start off with a basic of what I would normally tell a student who is with us in a very like kind of brief point, and then try to figure out how we could make that remote. So that way you understand the full design concept, the full design process first. And then we can kind of break it off into what should we do instead of this portion? How can we do this remotely? So the short answer is we need to read the play. If there's a play, if there's a short story, if it's a 10-minute play, if it's a poem, like you could really use any kind of work of art words, a children's book, anything like that, something short and sweet, because that might be able to be a lot easier. And then what I usually like to do after that is find some inspirational images. And that's just basically it's just a one-page collage of, these are the things that invoked me in this. So either it's a picture of some raindrops, or it's a picture of a couch, or pictures of cats or plants, or whatever it is, just to come up with some inspirational things. And then after that, we would have a meeting with the designers and the director and talk about the show, and kind of see where the concept is for the show that the director wants to go with, and see if any of the inspirational images that you found are working with that, working with the director. After that, then it would go back to reading the play again, making sure we're understanding where these characters are. And then I start to get some more inspirational images, and then we would have another meeting with the designer. And those inspirational images would be more based off of that concept. So is there like historical paintings? Are there like just any painter's work? Is there anything that we can find inspiration from that becomes a little bit more solidified than just that one broad piece? And then, of course, then it's meeting with the director again and seeing their opinion on all of this, as well as the other designers, because you have to make sure that everyone's on the same page, because we're all creating one piece of art. And then usually, like, what I like to do is then break up each character. So then I have a broad character. So let's just say we have two characters. There's this person and there's this person. I will then find images that are what those are. And frankly, all of this stuff can be done very remotely already. I have actually done 90% of my meetings for my show that's probably getting canceled this summer, all online. So all this stuff I've already done remotely. So it's super easy to do, especially, you know, sometimes in the real world, you do have a designer who's living across the states, you know, maybe in a different country or whatnot. So you have to do a lot of online work anyway. So after you're done creating the boards for each character, and these are just broad ideas, not specifics yet, because we still need to make sure that the director is going to be on the same page with you. Then after you meet with the director and they tell you like what they like, what they don't like, I really like this image, but I don't really see this person in pants. I see them in trouser, you know, like in culottes instead, or in a skirt, or maybe they're in something completely different. Then after that, the next thing I usually do is just basic line sketches. Can be very rough sketches, just trying to find a silhouette, basically, of what the character is going to wear. And you can try to break it down by scene. I would definitely try to find a show or like a book or a 10-minute play that has just one look. So that way we're not finding multiple looks for these characters. And then after that, we would have another meeting. There's a lot of meetings that go on in creative design because everyone's got to stay on the same page. And then the last thing after that is then your final rendering. So taking your silhouettes and your drawings and then creating them into their final renderings with colors and such. So I know that's a lot, but now we can kind of solidify it to, you can break it down into less pieces, but things that are really important when we're thinking about characters in books, in plays, musicals, whatever, is we need to know the time period that the show is set in. Is it set in the book? Is that something the director came up with, etc. We need to know location. Are they indoors? Are they outdoors? Also the location in the world. Are they on a coast? Are they in the South? Are they in the Caribbean? Are they in the East? I mean, really, where are they? Because those things are very helpful. This one's kind of fun. Are these characters or are these real people? Mm-hmm. Because you can do a fun play with characters, like Seussical is a good example of a character. And like the characters in Whoville, those are quote unquote real people, but they're character versions of those real people. Or are you just doing a basic show that all of a sudden has real people, but they're characterized versions of those real people? So that's always kind of something that you really got to focus on. And then there's just some other things that are helpful to identify a person from the first time we see them on stage. So their gender, or are they transgender, not conforming? What is their class? What's their job? Are they employed? And their race. Sometimes that comes into an involvement of what people wear. And those are all things that we kind of really need to look at in that sense. To make a very broad ways when we start drawing things, the things we want to look at is basic design. So like your silhouette, your line and mass, your colors, textures, fabric. And the thing that I find most important, well, not most important, the thing that I like to do personally as a designer is what is their arc through the show if they were ending up to change clothes. To give you an example, I was just designed a show where I had a gentleman who was in all black and white clothes throughout the entire show. And then the last time we see him, he's in more colored clothes. And it was vice versa for the other gentleman. He was in very bright colors through the whole show and then went into a monochromatic palette. So they kind of switched spots. So that's something that you can think about too, is what is their arc? Why are they changing? Should they be changing? So a lot of those things you can really, easily pull out. So things that are really easy to talk about is time period. So what's an easy thing to do? So let's look at the 1950s, because it's a pretty standard time period show. I think a lot of people, even students, have a good idea of what the 50s are, even though they don't have as much knowledge as some of us do. So that's great things. So then let's have them look up designs or look up historical images, like Sears catalogs, those kinds of things, and then looking for silhouettes. So then they can maybe find an entire research board of just 1950s images based off of this book or this whatever, or just doing a broad version of what is the 1950s and how do things change. So that's one thing that you could do. You could do location, just finding clothes of what's indoor, what's outdoor clothes. I mean, something as simple as that, because there's so many different types of trench coats or windbreakers or rain gear, or there's just so many different types of clothing that could be helpful for them to know that. Class is another one. Are you low class, middle class, upper class? Those are also things important. So a lot of those things can really help. You can really just pick one of those and just say, I want you to do research on this. So take a time period, take a location, and just figure that out. And then they can use that silhouette, line and mass and colors after they've do their research board, and they could draw out something. So that's kind of where I am, kind of basic on teaching costume design. So I know there's a lot, but I'm happy to answer any questions about any of that stuff that I just talked about, and happy to help brainstorm even more ideas about how to solidify some of those things that I just discussed.
That was really fantastic. That was great. Anna, do you have any other thoughts that you want to add on to that?
I could just jump in that I sort of jotted down, I'm a tech teacher as well. So just my own notes, this sort of intrinsic lessons there. If you were to teach a lesson is color wheel, what is silhouette? Those are full 45-minute lessons before you even jump into costume design. There are a bunch that just sort of jumped out at me as, oh, you can do a unit before you even start teaching design. So etiquette at a meeting, how do you run, which sort of segues nicely into stage management, but how do you set up a design presentation meeting and have that, so there are a lot of intrinsic lessons that if we're concerned about kids being overwhelmed, to start at that level of, let's talk about color, let's talk about silhouette, let's talk about how does a person dress to show their ethnicity or to show their socioeconomic status or to show their gender, you know, whatever it is. So you can go very in depth or you could go very basic with these lessons. So that's what I think was really cool about what you were saying, Kyle.
Thank you.
Yeah. So we do have one question. Cindy was wondering if you could define silhouette.
Sure, I was actually responding in the chat, but I will, I will say exactly what I was going to. So silhouette, it would just be the basic shape of a garment on a body. Think of a shadow. So like if we had an actor or an actress stand in front of like a screen and then shined a light behind them and we're in the front of it, what would that silhouette be? So there's no details, there's nothing like that. So it's helpful in that. So like when we think of, let's say we're using the 50s. So that basic silhouette is going to be just, you know, pretty triangle upper body, and then it kind of hoops out into that poof. If we think of like the 1920s, it's a very box shape that's very long. So that's what I'm kind of thinking of when I'm messaging silhouette. So that way it's just breaking it into that one step first before we get into that complete design. So that's something you could do, is have them find research images and then help draw the line silhouette of that garment.
Mm.
And that's something you can easily do too with just a piece of paper and even their monitor. They could just trace it out. That just helps with that, you know, those basic drawing things or those basic theories of design as a whole, not just costume based, but more or less all of our theatrical things that we do. Those are all very important.
Wedding dresses are a fun way to introduce silhouette.
Mm-hmm.
I've done it with like middle school, you know, just to make it very attainable, a cross section of wedding dresses, because
Right.
they're very obvious. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Sarah's in the chat also said that color wheel is great for establishing mood as well in design and matching those to the character. So color as well as the pattern and fabric choice are hugely important for historical accuracy and could be a unit all in themselves, which is, I think, a cool thing to consider. And Tina just jumped into that she'd add that silhouette teaches students about characters' mass on stage, which is, yeah.
Super important, because you got to worry, you have to worry about body type. So that adds into your silhouette, as well as literally how much space are they going to take up on stage. Because someone in this time period is going to take up less space. So like now, where we're all wearing leggings and form-fitting clothes, comparative to stuff like in 1895 where they have bustles, or 1880s where they have little peignets, you know, things like that. So shapes and silhouettes are always really fun to do. I would probably advise, if it were me, not doing anything earlier than the 20th century for these students, just because it is so, I mean, I don't know personally a ton about things earlier than the 20th century. So that's 1900s and earlier. I would stick in the 20th century if we're going to look at time periods, because those are mostly used. And they're a lot easier to come by, maybe someone can help me out with, when we're looking for images, it's the first, it's not a secondary image. It's like
primary. Yeah.
Primary, thank you. I was like, I don't know how to say this. But yeah, primary images are really important, because those actually show us what was really there instead of someone else's take on. And that's another thing you can even talk about too, is researching as a whole. How do you do research? I do a lot of online research, and I've been fairly successful. Also, I know what I'm looking for because I've been doing this for years, but knowing what websites are credible, knowing what images are really a painting of somebody in that time period, finding those credible resources can be very important when it comes to research.
Yeah, I mean, Lindsay, isn't that like a dramaturgy unit?
Yeah, which is what we're doing next week.
Yeah.
I'm gonna
that
teach
you
you
would
about all
begin
that
there.
research. Yeah, for sure.
Perfect. Lindsay will cover that next week. Come back for more information.
I just wanted to jump in really quick because, you know, sort of as a follow-up to what we were talking about last week as well, to begin any sort of design conversation with the pillars of design. And Kyle, I know that you're a designer, so maybe you could speak to this a little bit, but I know like line, shape, color. So like the 6, tell me what they are, because off the top of my head, I don't remember, but.
I don't remember
Okay,
either.
but
I'll be very honest.
And I teach it, so I haven't in a while, so I forgot it. But if you Google it, it's a really great place to start on any of the design elements, you know, like before you even jump into set or costumes or lights or sound, just to talk about what are, like, every designer, hair design and graphic design and theater design all start with the same line, shape, form, silhouette, proportion, color. It's a really good place to anchor any of these conversations.
Okay, I just did a good Google search.
Cool.
The 7 elements are line,
7, thank you.
shape, space, value, form, texture, and color.
Yeah. And I know that when you're talking about theater, you can like interchange the word, what was it? I always use texture, line, shape, color, proportion instead of one of those that you just said.
Mm-hmm.
And
proportion might be different for space.
Right. So, you know, you can interchange them based on what you need to teach. But there are, in the world of art, you could just look up, like the Google search Kyle just did.
Yeah, of course.
What those elements are and cater them to how you want your kids to think about design as a whole. And then it's really nice to go back to, where in costume do we look at texture? Where in set design do you see shape? Where, you know, because you can mix and match your words, and then you're also teaching some real life vocabulary too.
I love this. I'm going to jump in because there's a little bit of a pause. And we have a bunch of new people who have just joined, which, hello, we're so excited to have you here. If you guys want to pop over into the chat, which is at the bottom of your screen, if you just want to share where you guys are, what you guys teach, I always love to make this an opportunity for teachers to meet each other as well. And just so a very quick recap. So our mentors today are Kyle Pingle and Anna, and how do you say your last name? Fusco?
Yes. Fusco.
Okay, great. They're both mentors with Free Theater, and I'm just really excited for you guys to get to know them. So keep on asking questions in the chat. Feel free to unmute yourself. So if anybody has any questions right now, let's keep brainstorming going off of this costume design stuff. So is anybody working on anything in their classrooms? Does anybody have any more questions about the amazing information Kyle shared to us at the beginning? Go ahead. No, don't have one, Harrison. Decided no.
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay, does anybody, so let's go ahead and let's just for a moment, I would love, so Anna, do you have any other suggestions of ideas of how like the costume design can be used in like a classroom in a unit besides kind of what we've already talked about?
Virtually, like we're talking for our needs right now. Yeah, I mean, yes. I mean, going off of what Kyle said, I think time period is a really meaty place for a teacher to start with at least a base and then create a character from that. So even if you're not starting with a script, you'll go the opposite and say, I have a time, I have a place, you get to pick the gender, the race, the status, let's make a character. Or on the other hand, something I like to do is take a fairy tale. I know I see, we have a couple of middle school teachers, take a fairy tale, or even on a higher level, Paul Sill's story theater is a whole bunch of tales. And rework the setting and the time period of where that takes place. So you can name a fairy tale, you know, like, I don't know, Rapunzel.
Cinderella.
So, right, or Cinderella. So let's set Cinderella in a new place and a new time period. And how does this change the character? So now we already have, we know of her home life, we know of her situation. How does this change how she dresses or what she wears or how the audience would perceive her? So that's, I think, a way we can take these concepts of costuming and do them virtually. And it'd be fun to share. I think the kids would have a fun time jumping on a Zoom and introducing their new characters and why they chose. There's a lot of critical thinking there and why they chose what they chose. And then I think it would be so much fun to raid their house, right? And create this costume or do something. And Kyle, I wonder if you can just suggest, like, what would you use if you don't have access to a costume shop? If they have their sister's closet at their disposal, how can we sort of get the kids to think in terms of costume design?
Well, I mean, you got to think color, silhouette. I mean, we're going to go back to the basics. You know, you have to think of your color, your silhouette, your lines, you know, all those things are going to go right back into what are we finding. And then, you know, maybe there's like safety pins or masking tape. I mean, I don't know. These kids could even just use colored paper if they wanted to and cut something out. Or they could take a bed sheet and make something and wrap it around, I don't know, themselves if they wanted to, or their little sister if they want, you know, just really depends on who they want to use. So I think that's a really fun idea. When you started talking about that, I was like, I want to design for this new Cinderella because she sounds like fun. And the other, I mean, this might be crazy, but how do you design Cinderella in the world we're living in right now?
Right.
Like, that's insane.
The future is the kids love to do the future.
Yeah.
Because all bets are off, right? It's completely creative. So.
Right. So, I mean, that could be something really fun to just throw in there too, is make up your own world. Because I think that allows children to be a little bit more creative. I think it really helps us adults too, which is kind of nice. But then you kind of also have to go back to the basics at some point and say, all right, well, let's give you a time period to go off of.
Right. You have to anchor it in something. Yes, absolutely. So it's not a free for all, but yeah. I think any opportunity that you can have the kids ask why this character is wearing this and what the audience will perceive that from what this character is wearing is an interesting way to have them look at it. I mean, even if they're taking a step further, they're in the house, what do they have in their house? They have their toys, they have their dolls, they have their, you know, maybe a sibling's bunch of toys. Why is this character wearing it? And what can you, so like, let's take it in the opposite direction. I'm going to hold up a picture of, and, you know, teachers, you can get your hands on renderings, right? With a pretty simple Google search. What choices did you make about this character simply by looking at their persona, by looking at what they have on their body? And can you tell what year they live in? Or can you make assumptions about their status or their gender or their wealth or their what they do for a living? So to sort of take all those concepts, but now approach it in a different way, share these images and have the kids create a story simply based on what these characters are wearing. Because we're talking, until the characters start saying their lines, we're talking about the nonverbal communication of clothing, of your appearance. So I think that's a good way, it's another way virtually that we could get them thinking critically about costume design.
And I think that's something as costume designers we do all the time.
Right.
I always bring this conversation up every time with my new students who are learning when they're designing a show in like the 1950s. So we all have this stereotypical idea of what someone would wear in the 1950s. But we then find this research image from the 50s that looks something completely bonkers that you've never seen before. Us as costume designers are not going to choose that because our audience is not expecting that. They would actually be taken out of the idea that we're in the 50s, even though that we know that this image was correct.
Right.
It's the same thing with like an older person in the 50s. I mean, look at some of our like grandparents or our parents. They're still wearing fashion from like early periods. They're not wearing the clothes of now. So that's something to also think of within time period, is that stereotypical, and it kind of goes to that thing of what is our first visual instinct of this person, because that's our job as designers, is to tell the audience who this person is, at least in this moment of that state, you know? So I think that's super important.
Mm-hmm. And that's interesting too, because if they are quirky, then their clothing might be a little bit off the beaten path. And that's a conscious choice that the designer is making, that they want the audience to see. So it's a fun way to play with the concept.
Yes.
Okay, we have some comments, so I want to go through them. The chat was going crazy as you were talking, which is lovely. Okay, so people were really liking all of the stuff that you guys were talking about, like with like the at-home work. There was some, I hate this chat thing. So somebody was talking about how they were asking their students, Maria was talking about having their students use Barbies or dolls if they have them as models. And then Misty was talking about how she was going to break things out into 3 or 4 different tracks and have the students choose. So like doing costuming, makeup, lighting, etc. And Misty, I don't know if you got the recording from our first week, but I'm happy to send that to you or anybody else that wasn't there, because we talked a lot about lighting, sound design, and what was the other one, Anna? Set design.
A little bit of set, yeah.
Yeah. But Kyle, you also like do makeup and wigs, yes? Do you still do makeup, or you just do wigs now? Okay. Do you have anything that you want to like throw out there? Because that's actually probably something that kids can do. And I mean, they're all doing those TikTok videos right now, that super annoying contour one. So is there things that they can do besides learning on TikTok about makeup?
I mean, it's going to be the same process. It's still going to be that research, finding inspirational images again, and then what do I have in the house to use? Please don't use like permanent markers or things that are not intended for the face, because that's not a good way to do it. But that's something that they could do on paper with a drawn out face. They could do something in that effect. And know that basic stage makeup is probably a good place to start, or a basic beauty makeup. I wouldn't do anything period or blood, guts, and gore.
Would you do aging, maybe? Like a little bit
Aging would be fun, but
I think that would be fun.
Yeah, aging is actually one of the hardest things to do in makeup, which sounds crazy. But
is that why so many people look horrible on stage when they're aged, especially in high school?
100%.
I'm always like, this is terrible.
But what better time to practice,
Right. And I'm sure there's a lot of great resources out there, but that would be a little more difficult. But that's, something where you can find, like, if you want to look at old people, then just look at a whole bunch of images and create a board again of what that is. And then you can use your line and start drawing, like, where do the wrinkles go? Where is my shadow? Where would a highlight be? So you can break it up in that same vein of kind of using a silhouette, but just taking an image of an older person or someone else's makeup and just figuring out like where the shadows are and where the contours are. Not contours, the highlights are. So you could do makeup stuff. It's a little more difficult, I think, than the basic of costume design in general. But it is a possibility.
Love that. Also, Misty was very concerned that you were holding a snake. There was a whole conversation in the chat about it.
Oh, there would be no snake in this house, let me tell you. I'm afraid of them so bad.
That's awesome.
Just one of my 3 cats. The other one's sleeping back here.
You have 3 cats?
Yes.
Oh my gosh, me too. But not here. I have a dog here. This is really, really fantastic. Suella was talking about how she's going to be doing a unit with her students talking about directorial vision based on inherited theater traditions, which I think is wonderful. Misty also has a really good point that she's been following so many threads on Facebook and gathering materials, but feeling kind of overwhelmed. I think that that's something that if any of you are feeling that overwhelm, I feel that overwhelm every day. I hate technology. I can't wait until the world resumes because I'm never looking at my phone ever again on any Facebook group ever. I can't say that, but you know, I'm gonna try. But I think that that's really important. So if any of you, like if there's anybody in the chat that you're jiving with, that you're like, oh yeah, you seem like we have very similar, I would totally encourage you to exchange emails, because sometimes those groups are so overwhelming. Like the theater distance, like the teaching online one has like 10,000 people in it right now. And it's insane. So if you guys are feeling that overwhelmed, don't worry. There are so many resources out there, but don't worry about trying to figure it all out at once.
I also want to encourage, when you're feeling overwhelmed, just go back to the basics, you know, like each design area, and I'll talk a little bit about it in stage management, but each design area has a very basic set of, I spoke about pillars last week, or I think Kyle just gave a few pointers that just, if you focus on those, then your kids are getting a decent intro and dive into what these design areas are. So don't feel like, none of us, even hands-on, you know, in the schools, are getting into the real deep parts of these design elements. So there's no way, you know, take the pressure off you if you're teaching it online. I gotta say, I love the idea of teaching a director's vision or making a director's vision one of these at-home projects, because you can really have the kids think critically about the text and dive into the design area without it being so hands-on. You know, if you're really hashing out a director's vision and then even asking them to like give examples, make with the director's vision, have them create that inspiration board that Kyle was talking about for the whole play and not just costuming. An inspiration board for the design of the play. Break it, ask them to come up with a paragraph, a sentence, and a couple words for the vision. So again, thinking critically about what this vision is, to really hash it out in words, and then break it down to a very basic sentence of how you want the audience to feel, and then maybe a couple of emotion words or just descriptive words that can really have the kids get very intellectual about this vision. I think it's a great project for them to do, and it covers all the basics. It really does.
Yeah, I think that's really, I love that too. And I said to Suella in the chat, but we're gonna be talking about that with the dramaturgy, because it's also like a really way more fun application than creating a dramaturgy packet. Apparently, people don't like that. I don't know who those people are, because that's all I do with my life. But we're gonna be talking about that a lot more next week. And Maria had a really cool resource. So Maria was talking about how, like, back in the day, we used to have to like cut images out of like magazines and do the collages. She said there's something called Creative Commons. Creative Commons, or is that what you're saying, Maria? Or if you want to unmute yourself, can you tell me more what you're saying? Yes. Okay, great. So yeah, is that an app or something that kids can use? I've never heard of Creative Commons. Or does anybody else know?
Sounds great.
Awesome.
Yeah, no, Creative Commons can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, Creative Commons is something that we have to use a lot as teachers, obviously, just to make sure that you're within licensing, which obviously we all know with using with plays and everything as well, so that you're not using images. Because a kid sometimes, like, even though you have to attribute, you know, on Creative Commons the image, or, you know, like you do with anything else, the Creative Commons kind of embeds that immediately. As a, like the Google images, sometimes you have to like make sure it's embedded, but the kids don't always do a very good job of all that. So the Creative Commons kind of helps them embed it, embeds it for them. So you're within, you know, licensing and all that kind of stuff, whatever. And it's stuff that people have put out there, and you know, it's for, you know, fair use and everything, particularly within the classroom and everything. But I mean, there's images, there's, you know, articles of stuff, you know, it literally, you can Google Creative Commons and it'll come up. So,
Awesome.
and like everything else, you have to attribute where you got it from. So, but I
That's awesome.
haven't put that into play yet with this. That's why I was like kind of hopped on here to just to, you know, hopefully can do that, because, you know, obviously we're living in our little current world here. So
Yeah. No, that is awesome. Thank you so much, Maria, for sharing that. I love that. That's a really wonderful thing. Yeah, and Cindy just talked about the idea of a class that she took, and the instructor was talking about to choose a color, a sound, and a smell that you want the audience to get in that scene.
I think that's brilliant.
What a waitress in New York pumped in pie smell. Like, we're getting into, you know.
Yeah, that was amazing.
Yeah.
I just wanted pie then.
Right.
Right.
I want pie right now.
I mean, it's kind of fun for the kids to think about. I love that idea. It's kind of fun for the kids to think about how to make a truly immersive experience, you know. And then as we're talking, I had a project in college where we had to create site-specific theater. And it was so fun. I mean, someone did a zoo story on a bench in the local park, you know, or like, but so fun for the kids to really think about, give them a story and tell them, okay, set this in your house somewhere and record it. But, you know, and again, today we're talking very specifically about some tech elements, but to make theater an immersive experience, I think, is what will transcend the computer while we're aiming to do this.
For sure. And actually, I just confirmed that in May, we're doing a workshop on that specifically.
Oh,
yeah, we're going to do that. And then also talk about verbatim work and how those two can go really hand in hand right now, because what else do we really have to do? So
interview theater, that's great.
So okay, great. So this is a lot of awesome stuff about costume design. I don't want to move off of it if more people have thoughts or questions or ideas you want to bounce off of Anna or Kyle. So if anybody has any of those, go ahead and ask them, but I do want to make sure we have some time to talk about stage management. So if nobody has questions, we'll move on to stage management.
And feel free to, you know, jump in or interrupt, because as we said, I mean, it's kind of hard to, I mean, what we're doing with stage management from this vantage point is just, it's teaching it. And unfortunately, the opportunities to practice it seem far away, but I think we could come up with some. So when I sort of broached the idea of stage management with the kids, because it's such a big endeavor and it feels very large to them, is I break it down into 3 tasks, and their tasks are that they're coordinating, they're organizing, and they're communicating. And if you look at all the jobs within the show, they fall under those categories. So you are the person that's bringing things together, you are the person that's keeping them on track, and you're the person that's communicating what's happening to everybody else.
Anna, can I pause there and just ask a question?
Sure.
I just, from the folks that I've worked with, a lot of people don't know what a stage manager is supposed to do.
Sure. Okay.
They think that they're just coordinating, like moving on and off the sets. Would that be helpful for anybody to have Anna at the end go through, and Kyle, like, and look at, like, in your program, what are some things that you can have your stage managers be implementing so they don't just show up right at the end? If that'd be helpful, just throw it in the chat.
Well, here, let me sort of break down so I have given stage management workshops to teachers who truly want to learn how to do this for their schools. And when I give those workshops, the way I approach it is by looking at the production from start to finish, from soup to nuts. And that's the one description that I would give the stage managers. They are there for every single section of this production, which not everybody is. The director goes away when the show opens. The producers are far away from, the designers go away when the show opens. The front of house staff comes in when the show. So the stage manager is the one through line. And I think it's really important to break down their tasks at each step of those productions, of the production. So I have it broken up into 4 just to simplify it, which is pre-production, rehearsal, tech, and the run. So if you look at the production process from start to finish, you're breaking it down into pre-production, which is a lot of times casting, a lot of times design presentation meetings or design meetings, concept meetings, getting your groups together, hiring. And again, I'm talking on a outside of school level, but this all trickles down to the school levels as well. Your rehearsal is obviously you're in a rehearsal space or you're in your theater space. At the same time you're rehearsing, the set is being built, the costumes are being done, the lights are being designed and hung, the sound is being bought or coordinated. So the rehearsal, right, is the build. Tech is when it all comes together. The performance is the performance. And obviously like the run, however many performances you have. So the stage manager in each one of those has very specific tasks, which I could talk about, or I mean, you tell me, is that going to be helpful or is that, yes? Okay. Okay. And again, it all goes back to coordinating, organizing, and communicating. So in pre-production, the stage manager, depending on how you want to use them, is helping you with casting, or not helping you with casting, sorry, don't ask a student to do that, but helping you coordinate the audition, obviously, being the person who hands out the sides, keeping people in the rooms, coordinating, organizing. They also are the ones who gather information to make sure contracts are filled out, to disseminate information, whether you have a call board or you do it electronically. The stage manager is the one to be communicating that. Rehearsal, they are the ones, the 3 main tasks are coordinating rehearsal props and costumes and set pieces, taking the blocking, and accounting for where the actors are. So, I'm sorry, I left out a really important one, and then communicating with the rest of the design staff. So that's 4 main things. Communication with the rest of the actors, organizing the rehearsal stuff, props, costumes, sets, communicating to the other designers if anything happened in rehearsal that needs to be disseminated out. They're the ones who let them know that. And then most importantly is taking the blocking, which I think is a place where we can now virtually set up some lessons. The stage manage, if we want to teach stage management in this time from home, I think blocking is a really, it's a low-hanging fruit. We could teach that easily. We get into tech. The stage manager, it's now their show, frankly. They are given the cues. They are putting those cues in their book. They are calling the show and they are running tech. So that means they are, again, coordinating, organizing, and communicating. They are making sure that the 4 elements come together in order to then bring the show to a place where it opens, and then the show is theirs. They are the pilot. They are the ones flying the plane. They are calling the cues, making the critical decisions, keeping the integrity of the show, making sure that all the directorial decisions are followed through. When you get to the professional level, ensuring that nothing changes, that no subtle, things grow to be a change in the action on stage. And then most importantly, communicating what happened in the show that day to everybody else involved. And that usually happens through a rehearsal report, a performance report, or however the information is disseminated, but they keep everybody abreast of how the show went that day and night. So in a very I want to say in a nutshell, but it's a big job. I think if we now break it down to the points where we can bring the kids in, then we can create some lessons. If we are still trying to teach theater through our computers and teach kids how to be stage managers through their computers, I think one way to do it is to say, hey, there are 4 parts of the production. What would you have a stage manager do in the pre-production, the rehearsal, the tech, and the run of the show? And then we could start by what is blocking. Let's talk about what blocking is. Let's talk about what cues are and how to call a cue. Let's talk about some crisis moments in a live performance. How would you handle if an actor fell down on stage and couldn't go back on? Or how would you handle if an audience member cried out for help in the middle of your performance? So those are all stage management sort of tasks that they would have to deal with. We could throw out some hypothetics. Another way to teach the kids stage management is, I was just showing Lindsay before we started this conversation, the New York Times today had a pretty comprehensive list of all the live streams of live performances that are out there right now. To have your kids watch those and just note, when did a cue happen? When did something move on stage? When did a light change? When did a sound happen? When did when did a curtain open and close? And just have them take count in like a 5-minute period of how many cues were called. Right. Like, I know, right? It's kind of amazing. So just to break it down on a level that's not so scary for them, because it is a scary job. It's a very big job. And that's why your cream of the crop are the stage managers. But to help them understand the 3 basic concepts of coordinating, organizing, and communicating, but then to take it deeper into, let's watch a show and let's see where the mark of the stage manager is. And let's talk about how you never knew they existed before this conversation. All that stuff happened and someone made it happen, but let's talk about, how did it happen? Let's break it down almost backwards. We're watching the show now. Let's talk about how it got there.
Yeah, Sarah said to have a toolkit backstage for emergencies and brainstorm a list of what could possibly happen and be prepared.
Yes. And a stage management toolkit is a very real thing. So you can start by, like, one fun project would be go around your house. What do you think you need backstage?
I love that. That's a good one. Yeah, and Maria said that was like the best breakdown.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
So that's really wonderful.
I've been honing it a while, but thank you. I appreciate that.
So is anybody looking at doing any stage management projects? Do you guys have any questions about how you could do stage management and possibly teach it? Or Kyle, if you have anything you want to throw into.
No, currently. I did tell Anna and Lindsay, I was a stage manager in college, while also learning costumes. And then once I graduated college, I realized that, hey, I can manage a shop. So that's basically what I do now, is I manage shops and I also still design. But I still have my stage management toolkit around. It's a little different now these days, but yeah, the toolkit's a real big thing. You know, that was a fun thing for me in college, was what can I put in my toolkit? What will all the actors forget every time you're in a rehearsal?
You always had the best ones of anybody in college. So yeah. Good work, Kyle.
I also love the idea. It's funny because, you know, in this day and age, depending on when you trained in theater, like the kids know so much more than I do about how to use technology to run a show. So if you get the kids to figure out how to have a paperless production where it's all online, or all, if you're calling a show from your computer as opposed to a paper script, that would be a fun project. I always think about, and of course, like you don't want to give whole scripts, you want to do scenes, but think about how would you block this scene? And of course, that's a director's job and you're thinking like a director, but if you have 5 people on stage and you need them all to be seen by the audience, let's make a map of the stage and where would you put them? And it's as simple as when I record blocking by hand, you put the actor's initial and you circle it and you make a map of the stage. So one way to play with this idea of teaching blocking is create a very basic map of a stage with a couple of set pieces and hand them out to the kids and say, okay, for this scene, where would you have your actors stand? Now make them cross. Where are they crossing to? And how are you gonna show that on a piece of paper? And there are basic stage hands, which again, shorthands, which you could Google. But you know, cross, to write down a cross is the cross, to write down a sit is a little symbol. So it just depends on how you want to teach it and where you want to teach it. And then you just have to have the kids remember, someone wrote in the comments, they're supposed to write down their blocking, but if they miss something, the stage manager has it. So can someone take your book and know where they should be able to read your book and know how the show should look? It's a good practice for the kids.
Yes, absolutely.
Oh, I love the idea of gaff tape and
yeah. So yeah, they were wondering, they're like, what are some essentials for a toolkit?
So, I mean, it sounds funny, but think of emergencies, right? Well, I mean, obviously you want your flashlight, you want your pencils, you want your Band-Aids, you want your first aid kit. But what could go wrong and how can you fix it? So all kinds of tapes, all kinds of emergency first aid stuff. What was in mine? We had a bunch of extra gels in case something, you know, you needed to cover a light real quick.
I've had
someone put stapler for hymns.
Definitely.
Yeah, stapler for hymns. That's a great one.
Mm-hmm.
I've bought contact solution before because some people's contacts have come out, or
yeah, I mean sugar, like like if someone's sugar goes low, like
yep, candy,
a glucose tab, yeah, like and professionally the actors would request what they needed backstage. So I mean, and that's perfectly okay for a student to do, to say, you know, what do you need me to have on hand?
Oh, water bottles.
Yeah.
Oh gosh, yeah, that would be awful to choke on stage or while smoking a cigar. That would suck. Yeah.
Oh, like, you know, oh, and thank you for saying that, because another great stage management task is safety, health and safety. So if you task the kids with, here's our show, what do we need to have in place so that everybody on stage is safe? And if there's an emergency, they are taken care of. And then what's fun is you can throw in, this show happens to have a lit torch. Now, what would you do? What do you need backstage?
a lot of stuff according to equity.
Yeah. And then while we're on that subject, in our sort of chatting, I jotted it down to take it to the next level, that if you are teaching, if you really want your kids to start thinking about pre-professional work or professional work, have them research the unions. There are very specific guidelines that Actors Equity puts on stage managers to put on the actors. years, you know, and it's very specific because they are looking out for the health and safety of everybody involved. It's a great research project, and to think about why is this rule in place, and what is the craziest rule you could find. I think that I always got hung up, Kyle, I think you can think about this, that the stage management nor the set people are allowed to touch the light. Even though the light is a prop, you may only ask an electrician to turn on your lamp on stage, you know, so there's such specific rules, but it's fun to dive in and then really look at why and how and what's the backstory.
And Anna, what union is a stage manager a part of?
Equity, Actors Equity.
Okay.
But then also to look up IATSE rules, right?
Those ones are real hard to find, just so you know.
And they're very specific. But so then maybe make it an interview, right? Find somebody who is a union worker or a union electrician, a union sound guy, a costumer, and ask them. Might be fun, like conduct an interview.
Yeah, and right now, if anybody wants to do that, I mean, not to sound like anybody will do anything, but so many people right now are home that you can find a lot of people who potentially could be interested in that. And if you are interested in doing that with your students, please feel free to reach out to us. Like, we can definitely try to find you some folks. I worked with IATSE in Seattle a lot back when I was there. So, but for those of you that maybe don't know what IATSE is, can you guys just, I don't even remember what the acronym stands for, but what is IATSE?
I don't remember the acronym.
International Association of Stage
Theatrical Stage Hands and
Yep.
Entertainment?
Yeah.
Entertainment. Yep.
Okay. Yeah, so it's going to be all those folks, and your students could look into it because they can get into the union,
Right.
which is what I used to do in Seattle, was like help like kids transition out of high school and go into the union to get trade work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
New York, one of the Roundabout Theater Company, one of the predominant theater companies, has a college alternative for kids who want to go that route, and it's a mentorship, and it's a 2-year process, and at the end they leave having set up to take the test, and with enough hours.
I want to go there.
It's pretty amazing. Yeah.
That's the program that I helped create back in Seattle at Intimon. It's called Starfish. It's for high school kiddos, as opposed to college alternative. But anyways, yeah, so there's like lots of cool programs like that out there. So, but if anybody wants to have I think looking up the unions would have been something that I would have loved to have done.
Right. I mean, it's
I want to
much higher level, and it's not, I mean, if they're home, I don't know that that's going to entertain them very much, but I do think, or engage them very much, but I do think it's an important part of understanding how a show works. And especially if you're up to teaching stage management, you're definitely up to teaching the nuances of how these groups of people work together. And with the stage manager at the helm, it's a good way to introduce that and take it up a level, frankly.
Yeah, for sure. I love this. This has been super helpful. Like all of this information about stage management. I'm so excited. So we have about 15 minutes left. So I would love to make sure that we have time for questions. Does anybody have any questions that you guys want to ask? Or was there anything during this that came up that you're like, oh, this could be a really cool lesson that like came to me as we were talking about that you want to share out with some other teachers? Go ahead and unmute yourselves if you do. Or we can sit in awkward silence too, which is also my favorite.
I could start singing.
Perfect. Hey, Aria.
Hey, I was thinking, the live performances you guys were talking about, which I did put a couple of links up on our online platform that we use for our school system. And I think that they could, like, I had them do, how many cues do you think were happening here or whatever. I'm curious if there's a way, I mean, sometimes you could find, scripts, I'm sure they're all illegal, online or whatever, but I'm curious if, you know, there's a way that they can get that online and write down, you know, calling the cues. Like, and I'm not saying very long. I'm saying like, when I had them look at stuff before, it was only maybe 3 minutes long. I mean, I didn't necessarily do like a 2 hour, 2.5 hour show or whatever. But just take like a minute, 2 minutes long and try to have them actually write the cues down there, or even the blocking for that matter too. Like you have, you know, you're watching Aladdin and you have the, and write down the blocking for that. I mean, these kids find stuff that I can never find online, you know, scripts. I'm like, how did that even get there? I don't know, that might be.
No, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I mean, that might be like a cool option to kind of put it in to play, you know, as close as we can get, you know, right now.
There are, I did find just on YouTube a couple of stage manager calling cues, like recordings from watching the show from the booth, and you hear in your ear. The other thing to throw out is getting into the show, right? So from the time the house manager says, okay, show's yours, before the actor speaks, there's a good 10 cues, right? Like you're taking out the pre-show music, you're taking out the house lights, you're taking out the pre-show light, you're calling the actors on stage, you're opening the curtain if you have one, you're bringing up scene light, you're bringing up a cue or two of sound. Like there's a good 10 cues in there, I'm holding chopsticks, sorry, that you can have the kids think about, even just to get into the scene, get into one scene. Or if you want to give them transitions, right? So you're going out of a scene. So the last line is called, you're bringing up music, you're taking out lights, you're switching to scene lights, you're closing the curtain, you're calling the transition, you're waiting for the transition to be done, you're calling the next scene lights, you're calling the next scene music. That right there is enough to sort of occupy the kids' brains into thinking what needs to happen when and in what order and what's the safest. Like you can't go to a complete blackout and call the scene change, because then the scene change is happening in black. So that's the kind of thing that even before you start thinking about the nuances of scripts and what the script needs, what are the basic cues that happen in every show?
Yeah, that's awesome. I think that's super smart.
I really like the idea, like you said, before the curtain even opens, because that's one thing I just do as it happens with the kids, or, you know, like in dress rehearsals or whatever, but that's something that you don't really think about teaching, like everything else. You put down the blocking for like the show.
And as teachers, we just do it, right? Like,
right,
how many
exactly.
times are you the one calling the cues? Or
exactly, yeah.
for the kids to start. And also, it's kind of nice to teach them the format, the standby and the go, and to teach how go is the word that you listen to. So if you guys don't know it, usually if there's space between cues, you give a warning that a cue is coming. So let's just say there's a lighting cue and you haven't had a cue for a while, you give a warning. And you would just and all that is making sure that your light person is there and ready to hit the button. And then you give a standby. So the language is standby light cue 6. And then on the go, it's like cue 6 go. And so there's a very specific reason that the go is the last word that comes out of your mouth, because that's what they press the button on. So that in itself is a lesson. And that in itself is a fun task to give your kids, you know, to practice while you're sitting on your computer, practice calling those cues. And then when you look up, or if you hear, or if you get a prompt script, or if you get the YouTube of a stage manager calling the script, they'll understand how that's theater. Like that's the rule. You will never hear a show called a different way anywhere in the world. So it's kind of fun for them to think about it as this is how it happens, no matter where you are.
And Tina also said looking at samples of prompt books online. Maybe that's something she had a question mark. Yeah, that would be wild. That'd be such a fun, interesting project.
And they exist. They do exist every once in a while. And also There are plenty of books on stage management. I have one somewhere, somewhere in this room. And in those books, they have samples.
I have a question. So you're talking about each of the cues, and a lot of those, in my experience, are done by the lighting designer. Have already been designed and figured out, and he just does.
And they're the ones who press the button. Yeah.
Right. Do you go back and have the stage manager have to know all those?
No. And again, are you talking about a student stage manager or?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So in the case of a student stage manager, I would absolutely say scale back. They can call the sound, or they could call the actors, or they could call the transitions. But there's no reason, if a lighting designer is the one designing it, is the one running the show.
Right.
There's no reason to
Just let them go.
Yes, like I said, if you're teaching it to have, because I think in my 10-year career, 3 students who have pursued stage management, and they should know how to do it formally. But just as a practice, to have those stage managers, of course, there's no need. I would say give them what they can handle. I mean, we've had stage managers who can only handle calling the transitions. So I put them on stage, let them be backstage. And then I'll be in the booth making sure, not even calling it, but making sure sound and lights go when they're supposed to. But again, if we're talking about the virtual aspect of this and trying to teach it virtually, having a kid, if you know that they're a kid who's good with people and good with communication, having them lay out how they would run their backstage. What rules would they want in place? How would they run a transition? How would they ensure safety? Where are the prop tables going to go so actors can grab props easily as they run on stage? Those are all tasks that the theater-minded kid would really get into and really understand. But I agree, it's too big of a task to ask a kid if there's not a need for the kid to do it.
Right. Well, and I'm just thinking to esteem the lighting designer, I don't want to be,
Of course.
somebody else to be telling him what to do.
And do you have kids who design, or is it someone you bring in?
I do, actually.
Absolutely. Then the kid, yeah, that's fantastic.
Amazing.
And then the kid should be doing his own show. Absolutely. The only thing I would highly recommend is ins and outs. So at least there's one, the stage manager is the one person saying, okay, we're starting. On my go, hit one, and then curtain call, maybe. Just to make sure it's coordinated and get all the kids in this mindset of, here's the one. We don't want it all over the place.
Right.
I mean, and it also goes back to responsibility, right? And this was like what got my goat when I was doing it professionally, that if the sound designer was sleeping and missed a cue, he wasn't getting the call from the director or the producer. That was my butt on the line. So I kind of like the kids to think about it like that, because you're also teaching students to respect students' authority, which is hard. So in a high school setting, to think about the stage manager as a position that is earned and highly respected. I mean, I have not had a tremendous amount of success with that, because kids just don't want to listen to their peers telling them to get off the stage or get to places or whatever it is. So it's a learned, it's a learned thing, and they do get it eventually, but it takes a while. So, but I love the fact that you're wanting your designers to run their own show. Of course.
Yeah, he's a gem.
I love that. That's nurture that.
Right.
Send them to college for it.
Awesome. Does anybody else have any questions or thoughts they want to share? Anything like that?
No, this has been really helpful.
I'm so glad. Yeah, that's so
I think
great.
I might need to do a stage manager training in fall.
Yeah, no, that would be awesome. I was jotting that down too. I'm like, maybe we should do something like that where the directors and the students can come together and do like a workshop digitally, and work with some people. So,
Lindsay, is this available as a audio?
yes. So I will be sending out tomorrow.
Okay, good.
The recording, and so the
I
recording.
didn't write down notes.
Yeah. So this will come out as a recording tomorrow. It'll be on the location that it lives, that you get on that link for 7 days. But then you can go to our website. In May, they will all be up on our website for free as well. So if you need to go back, but obviously if you need it before then, just email me and we'll get it to you. I'm bad at website management. It takes me forever to do that. So yeah, but no, I just wanted to thank Anna and Kyle so much for coming.
Thank you.
Pleasure.
Yep.
Such great insight. So we have I have just put some links over in the chat. We have our general like website link over there. We have a bunch of free resources. We're continuously adding to them. To go to our website, you can check them out there. If you are attending and you didn't sign up and you just found the link online on Facebook, if you want the recording, just go to the second link on there and you'll be able to sign up so that you can get the recording. The other thing I'll just throw out is, so besides this brainstorm, on Thursdays, we also are doing a musical theater history class that looks at the rebellious history of musical theater. That is pay what you can, so it's totally free. And we're going into our third class tomorrow, but if you're interested and you've missed the first two, I can totally get you those. And that's open to students too, if you have any kiddos that might be interested in that. And then finally, also just wanted to say that if this has been helpful, like working directly with Anna or Kyle, they're both our mentors, one of like 7 mentors that we have. And we have a group called Spotlight that's a small education community on Facebook. Like, it's not like these thousands of people. And in the group, Anna and Kyle, along with our other mentors, directly can brainstorm with you. We have all kinds of like in-group events. We have happy hours once a month. We have open office hours, all kinds of stuff like that. So if you're interested in that, please go ahead. You can click that final link. We're doing pay what you can for any educators through the end of June, but we're going to keep doing it through all this COVID stuff because we just want to be a resource. And I know that a lot of those like large group ones at least stress me out. And so we just have a smaller one for you guys if you're interested, and you get more workshops and all that kind of stuff included in that group as well. And then the final, I want to say thank you to our April sponsors. BookTix is sponsoring all of our April programming, allowing us to bring this to you guys on a free or pay what you can basis. And if any of you if this has been helpful for you in any possible way, because all of our programming is free or pay what you can, we're still trying to keep all of our mentors and everybody with some steady income and helping other artists. If you would like to do any donations, they'll go towards our artists and keeping everybody on staff. But you don't have to, because we don't care. We just want to be here to support you. So that's totally optional. But I put that link there as well. But please let me know if there's any way that we can support you. Feel free to reach out to me directly. You all have my email now. But yeah, we're just here to help you guys get through all of this. And I'm so grateful that you guys took some time to be here. It shows how dedicated you are to your students and not just kind of giving up in all of this chaos.
Yeah.
Thank you guys so much. I will
Thank you.
questions.
Thank you, guys.
Otherwise,
No
we'll talk to
problem.
y'all soon. Okay, bye.
Nice to meet you,
Thank you.
Kyle.
Bye, Harrison. Bye, Sid.
Bye, guys.
Bye, guys.
How the heck do I get out of here?